The howling stopped the moment I stepped into the clearing. For 3 days, that sound had pulled at something deep inside me, a resonance that had no business existing between a human woman and creatures I'd only known from folklore. But grief doesn't respect the boundaries between species. It finds the hollow places in your chest and fills them with its own weight. Snow fell in heavy silence now as I approached the compound's iron-bound gates, each step forward requiring a conscious choice to keep moving. My arms ached from carrying the pup, but I held him closer, feeling the fragile warmth of his small body against my ribs. The crimson stains on his silver-gray fur had finally stopped spreading, but his breathing remained shallow, labored. Too quiet. Almost there, I whispered, though I wasn't certain I believed it. Wasn't certain of anything except the relentless instinct that had driven me from my isolated cabin, past every rational thought that screamed to leave this alone, to let nature take its course. But I'd seen the blood in the snow. The tracks that told a story of violence and loss. And when I'd found him, this impossibly small survivor with eyes that held too much awareness, something in my grandmother's pendant had grown warm against my skin, as though recognizing something I couldn't yet name. My frozen fingers found the heavy knocker. The impact echoed across the valley like a gunshot, and I flinched, suddenly acutely aware of my transgression. I was standing uninvited at the threshold of the Black Creek Pack's territory, a place whispered about in the small Montana towns with equal parts fear and superstition. The locals called them dangerous, isolated, unnatural. They weren't entirely wrong. The silence stretched. Wind carved through the pines, sending cascades of snow from their branches. Just as I considered setting the pup down at the gate and running, abandoning this mad compulsion that had consumed the last 72 hours, I heard the scrape of a bolt being drawn back. The gate opened to reveal a man whose presence seemed to displace the very air around him. Tall, powerfully built, with features carved from the same stone as the mountains surrounding us. But it was his eyes that stopped my breath, pale amber, almost luminescent in the dying light, fixed on me with an intensity that felt physical. His expression was granite. Hostile. Then his gaze dropped to the bundle in my arms. I pulled back the edge of my coat, revealing the pup's blood-matted fur, the silver-burned wound across his small ribs that I'd spent 3 sleepless nights trying to clean and close. The pup released a thin, pitiful sound, barely more than a breath. The transformation in the man's face was instantaneous and absolute. The granite shattered. For one raw moment, I saw beneath the careful control to something devastating, hope warring with disbelief, grief colliding with desperate, impossible relief. "You," he breathed, and his voice cracked on the single word. His hand reached out, stopping just short of touching the pup, trembling. "How?" Then his eyes snapped back to mine, and I felt the full force of his attention like lightning seeking ground. His nostrils flared. His pupils dilated, then contracted sharply. Something shifted in the air between us, electric, primal, undeniable. "Inside," he commanded, his voice rough with authority and something else I couldn't identify. His hand closed around my wrist with startling gentleness, despite his urgency. "Now, before you collapse." I hadn't realized how close I was to doing exactly that until he said it. The gates swung shut behind us with a finality that should have terrified me. Instead, as he led me across the compound while others emerged from buildings to stare, as whispers rose and fell in a language that sounded almost like my grandmother's old lullabies, I felt something I hadn't experienced since she died. I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. The man stopped abruptly, turning to face me fully for the first time. Up close, I could see the exhaustion carved into his features, the grief he wore like a second skin. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of prophecy. Omega. I didn't know what the word meant. But my grandmother's pendant burned hot against my chest, and the pup in my arms released a sound that might have been contentment. And somewhere in the compound, the howling began again. But this time, it didn't sound like mourning. It sounded like recognition. "Thank you for sticking around with me," my wonderful story family. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Chapter 1. The man Garrick Voss, I would learn later, didn't release my wrist as he pulled me deeper into the compound. His grip was careful, almost reverent, as though I might shatter under too much pressure. Or perhaps it was the pup he was being careful with. I couldn't tell where his desperation began and ended. Others materialized from doorways and shadows, converging on us with predatory silence. They moved wrong, too fluid, too coordinated, like a single organism responding to invisible signals. Their eyes caught the lamplight in ways human eyes shouldn't, reflecting gold and silver and amber. A woman with dark hair tied back in a severe braid stepped forward, her gaze locked on the bundle in my arms with an intensity that made my grip tighten protectively. "Is it?" she began, her voice breaking. "Kaylin," Garrick cut her off, his tone brooking no argument. "Prepare the medical wing. Everything we have for silver poisoning. Move." She disappeared without another word, and two others followed immediately. The remaining figures pressed closer, forming a tightening circle that set every instinct screaming. I could feel their grief like a physical presence, thick, suffocating, threaded through with something sharp and dangerous. These weren't people who had lost something. These were people who had been carved hollow by loss and left to walk around with the wound still open. The pup stirred against my chest, whimpering softly, and the sound rippled through the assembled group like an electric current. Several of them made sounds low in their throats, not quite human, not quite animal. Grief-given voice. Garrick's hand on my wrist tightened fractionally, and I realized he was shaking. This man who radiated authority and barely contained violence was trembling as he guided me toward the largest building. We climbed wooden steps worn smooth by countless footsteps, and he shouldered open a heavy door into warmth and golden light. The medical wing was already prepared, Kaylin moving with efficient urgency, laying out instruments and vials on a metal tray. The sharp scent of antiseptic cut through the warmer smells of wood smoke and something wild I couldn't identify. Garrick finally released me, but only to reach for the pup himself. I should have let go immediately. Should have handed over the small, broken creature I'd carried for miles through the snow. But my arms locked instinctively, and I found myself taking a half step back before I could stop myself. Garrick's eyes snapped to mine, and for a heartbeat, I saw the hostility return, raw and territorial. Then something shifted in his expression. Recognition of some kind. His hands, which had been reaching to take the pup by force if necessary, softened. Opened in offering rather than demand. "Please," he said, and the single word carried the weight of 3 days of unanswered howling. "Let me see him." The vulnerability in that plea broke something in me. I carefully transferred the pup into his massive hands, watching as Garrick cradled the small body with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so physically imposing. His thumb brushed over the pup's matted fur, tracing the silver-burned wound with devastating care. "Finn," he breathed, and his voice cracked completely. "God's Finn." The pup Finn made a soft sound and turned his muzzle weakly toward Garrick's chest. The man's entire body shuddered, and I watched frozen as this alpha who commanded absolute authority from his pack struggled visibly against tears. Then his eyes found mine again, and everything changed. The air between us seemed to compress, crackling with something I had no name for. Garrick's pupils dilated, and I watched his nostrils flare as he drew in a deep breath, scenting me, I realized with a jolt. Actually scenting me like an animal would. "Who are you?" he demanded, but his voice had gone quiet, almost awed. "What are you?" "Mira," I managed. "Mira Winters. I found him in the forest behind my cabin. He was alone, bleeding. I couldn't just leave him." "Winters," Garrick repeated, and something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe. Or disbelief. He looked at Kaylin, who had stopped her preparations to stare at me with equal parts wonder and wariness. Kaylin, tell me I'm not. You're not imagining it, she said softly, moving closer to study me with clinical intensity. I feel it too. It's impossible, but she reached toward me, her fingers stopping just shy of touching my shoulder. The air around her hand seemed to shimmer. Alpha, she's Omega, Garrick said again, and this time it wasn't a question. It was a declaration. A certainty that seemed to settle into his bones and straighten his spine. He laid Finn carefully on the examination table, then turned to face me fully, and the force of his attention nearly drove me back a step. You're an Omega. A human Omega. The words meant nothing to me, but my grandmother's pendant burned hot against my skin, and somewhere deep in my chest, something that had been sleeping my entire life began to wake. Chapter 2. Kaylin moved with practiced efficiency, her hands gentle as she examined Finn under the harsh medical lights. I stood against the wall where Garrick had positioned me, close enough to watch, far enough to stay out of the way. He hadn't left the pup's side, one large hand resting near Finn's head as though his presence alone could anchor the small creature to life. Pure bloodline, Kaylin murmured, her fingers carefully parting the blood-matted fur around the wound. Luna's son. There's no question. She glanced at Garrick, and something unspoken passed between them, grief sharp enough to taste. He shouldn't have survived this long. Silver poisoning this severe at his age. But he did survive, Garrick said, his voice rough. 3 days, she said. 3 days alone with a wound like this. His amber eyes found mine across the room, burning with an intensity that made my breath catch. How? I shook my head, exhaustion making my thoughts slow and thick. I kept him warm. Used herbs my grandmother taught me, yarrow, comfrey. I didn't know what else to do. He was so small, and he wouldn't stop trying to live, so my voice cracked. I couldn't let him give up. Kaylin's hands stilled over Finn's wound. She looked at me with new understanding, then at Garrick. Alpha, the silver's gone deeper than I thought. It's threaded through his blood, corrupting the healing process. Even with our strongest remedies, I'm not certain. She trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the sterile air. Finn whimpered, a thin, reedy sound that pierced straight through my chest. Before I realized I'd moved, I was at the table, my hands hovering over his small body. The pendant around my neck had gone from warm to burning hot, the amber stone seeming to pulse with its own light. Let me, I heard myself say, though I had no idea what I was offering to do. Garrick's hand shot out, catching my wrist before I could touch Finn. His grip was firm but not painful, his eyes searching mine with a mixture of desperation and wariness. You don't know what you're doing. If you're truly Omega, untrained, without control, you could hurt him. Hurt yourself. He's dying, I said simply, meeting his gaze. I can feel it. Can't you? Something in my words made Garrick's expression crack. His grip on my wrist loosened, and I felt the moment he made his decision, felt it like a physical thing, a shift in the air between us. He stepped back, yielding space. My hands moved on instinct, fingers finding the clasp of my grandmother's necklace. The pendant fell into my palm, impossibly hot, the amber stone glowing with inner light that shouldn't exist. Kaylin made a soft sound of surprise, but I was already lowering the pendant to Finn's wound, pressing the warm metal against silver-burned flesh. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Energy poured out of me, not blood, not breath, but something more fundamental. I felt it drain from somewhere deep in my core, flowing through my hands and into the pendant, then into Finn. The pup's body arched slightly, and for a terrifying moment I thought I'd hurt him. Then his breathing deepened, steadied. The frantic rhythm of his too-fast heartbeat began to slow, finding a stronger, healthier cadence. The wound beneath my pendant began to close. Not completely, the damage was too severe, but the angry red inflammation faded to pink, and the black threads of silver corruption retreated visibly, like poison being drawn from a wound. Finn's whimpering stopped. His small body relaxed, tension draining away as whatever I was doing, whatever this impossible thing was, took hold. I felt Garrick's hand on my shoulder, steadying me as my knees buckled. Heard Kaelin's sharp intake of breath. But I couldn't stop, couldn't pull away until I felt Finn's presence strengthen, until that fragile thread of life thickened into something that might actually hold. Enough. Garrick's voice rumbled near my ear, his other arm coming around my waist to support my weight. Mira, that's enough. You'll kill yourself. The pendant fell from my nerveless fingers, clattering against the metal table. The room tilted sideways, and I would have fallen if Garrick hadn't been holding me. Through the gray creeping into the edges of my vision, I saw Finn breathing, steady, deep, peaceful. Alive. Impossible, Kaelin whispered, her hands hovering over the pup's wound. The silver's been neutralized. Completely. I've never seen. She looked up at me with something like reverence. What are you? But I couldn't answer. The exhaustion crashed over me like a wave, pulling me under, and the last thing I felt was Garrick's arms tightening around me as darkness claimed everything. Chapter 3. I woke to firelight and the scent of pine smoke. My body felt hollowed out, like something vital had been scooped from my core and left me emptied. Every breath required conscious effort, and when I tried to sit up, the room swayed dangerously. Don't. Garrick's voice came from somewhere to my left. You nearly burned yourself out. Kaelin said you need rest, food, and time. In that order. I turned my head slowly, carefully, to find him sitting in a leather chair near the fire, watching me with those unsettling amber eyes. We were no longer in the medical wing. This room was smaller, warmer, lined with bookshelves and smelling of old paper and wood. A study, I realized. His study, judging by how naturally he occupied the space. Finn. I managed, my voice rough. Something in Garrick's expression softened fractionally. Stable. Sleeping. Kaelin says whatever you did bought him time, maybe bought him everything. The silver corruption has stopped spreading. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. Now you're going to tell me how a human woman living alone in the Montana wilderness knows how to heal a werewolf pup with silver poisoning. The word werewolf should have shocked me. Should have sent me scrambling for the door, logic and reason screaming that such things didn't exist. But I'd felt the truth of it since the moment I'd found Finn. Had recognized it in the way these people moved, the way their eyes caught the light, the grief that had resonated through the compound like a howl made tangible. I didn't know what I was doing, I said honestly. I just felt what he needed. Felt what was killing him, and something in me responded. My hand drifted to my throat, finding the pendant back around my neck. Someone, Kaelin, probably, had returned it while I slept. My grandmother gave me this before she died. Said our family had always been bridges between worlds. I thought she meant metaphorically. Garrick's gaze fixed on the pendant with an intensity that made me want to cover it with my hand. Winters, he said softly, as though testing the weight of the name. Your grandmother, what was her name? Eleanor Winters. His eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, they held something like resignation. She was here. Once. 30 years ago, when my father was Alpha. There was an incident, a pack member caught in a bear trap, wounds infected with iron and poison. Our healer couldn't touch him without burning. But Eleanor could. He stood, moving to the bookshelves to pull down a leather-bound journal. My father wrote about it. Called her a miracle. Called her Omega, though she denied it. Said she was just human, just a healer. What does that word mean? I asked, struggling to sit up fully. Omega. You keep saying it like it explains something. Garrick returned to his chair, the journal unopened in his hands. For a long moment, he seemed to wrestle with how much to tell me. Then his shoulders dropped, some invisible burden settling more heavily across them. In wolf packs, there are alphas, leaders, protectors. There are betas, the strength and structure. And then, rarely, there are omegas. He looked at me directly. Omegas are healers, mediators, emotional anchors. They balance an alpha's aggression, soothe a pack's tensions. They're empaths with the ability to project calm, to influence emotional states, to heal not just bodies, but the bonds that hold a pack together. His voice dropped. They're also extinct. The last true werewolf Omega died over a century ago. Since then, packs have been fragmented, volatile, incomplete. But I'm human, I said, though the words felt less certain than they should have. Your bloodline isn't. Garrick opened the journal, turning pages until he found what he wanted. The Winters family has carried Omega traits for generations, diluted, latent, but present. You're what we call a human Omega. Rarer than the werewolf version. More powerful in some ways because you bridge both worlds. He looked up, and his expression was stark. You can touch silver without burning. Can heal wounds that would kill our own healers to treat. Can project emotional influence across species lines. The implications crashed over me like ice water. That's why you all reacted to me. Why Kaelin felt it too. Every wolf in this compound knows what you are on an instinctual level, Garrick confirmed. You smell like pack, like safety, like home. It's why I didn't tear you apart for trespassing. Why I'm sitting here explaining any of this instead of locking you up until I figure out what to do with you. And Finn. I pressed. You said he's Luna's son. What happened? The shudders came down over Garrick's expression, grief reasserting itself. 3 days ago, hunters attacked during a supply run. Specialized hunters, they knew our routes, our patterns. They carried silver ammunition, silver blades. They were hunting my mate. His voice went flat, emotionless in the way of someone reciting unbearable facts. Kara died protecting Finn. We thought we'd lost him too. Found blood, tracks leading into the forest. Then the trail went cold. He crawled, I whispered, understanding flooding through me. He crawled for miles, trying to get home. Garrick's jaw clenched. And you found him. You, a Winters. A human Omega appearing exactly when we needed one most. He studied me with new intensity, suspicion threading back through his grief. That's quite a coincidence, Mira Winters. The implication stung, but I met his gaze steadily. You think I had something to do with the attack? I think timing matters, he said quietly. And I think until I know for certain why you're here, you're not leaving this compound. Chapter 4. The door to Garrick's study slammed open hard enough to crack against the wall. A man stood in the doorway, chest heaving, blood streaking down his left arm. His eyes were wild, more wolf than human, and when he spoke, his voice came out rough and distorted. Northridge. They're back, Alpha. At least 20, maybe more. Military-grade weapons, silver rounds. He swayed, catching himself against the doorframe. They're not scouting this time. This is a siege. Garrick was on his feet before the man finished speaking, his entire demeanor transforming in a heartbeat. The grief-stricken father vanished, replaced by something primal and commanding. How long? 10 minutes. Maybe less. Nash is holding the northern perimeter with 8 others, but they're outgunned. The man's gaze flicked to me, lingering with sudden suspicion. Alpha, she. I know, Garrick cut him off, his eyes finding mine with an intensity that felt like accusation. The air between us turned sharp, dangerous. Convenient timing, Mira Winters. You appear with my son, and 3 days later, the hunters who killed my mate return with an army. The implication hit like a physical blow. You think I led them here? I think you're either incredibly unfortunate or incredibly duplicitous. He moved toward me with predatory grace, and I saw the wolf just beneath his skin, saw how thin the veneer of humanity really was. Tell me which. I didn't, I started, but another figure appeared in the doorway, this one supported by 2 others. The man between them was massive, his dark hair matted with sweat, and his right side was a mess of blood and burned flesh. The acrid smell of seared meat filled the room, and I recognized the distinctive pattern of silver wounds. Dax took 3 rounds covering the western approach, one of the supporters said, his voice tight. Silver hollow points. They're targeting our betas, Alpha. They know our structure. Garrick's attention snapped to the wounded man, Dax, and I watched the calculation happen behind his eyes. Protect the pack. Assess the threat. Contain the unknown variable. His gaze returned to me, hard and final. "Kaelin," he shouted, and the healer appeared almost instantly, as though she'd been waiting nearby. "Take her and Finn to the safe room. Northwest wing, behind the reinforced door. Do not open it for anyone but me." "Understood." "Alpha, she could help," Kaelin began, but Garrick's expression silenced her. "She could also be working with them. Until I know which, she stays contained." He turned to the men supporting Dax. "Get him to medical. Do what you can. I need him functional if this turns into close combat." Then, to the bleeding man still standing in the doorway, "Marcus, sound the full alert. Everyone to defensive positions. Children and non-combatants to the underground shelters. And someone find out how the hell they got past our outer sentries without triggering the alarms." The room erupted into motion. Kaelin gripped my arm, not roughly, but firmly, and pulled me toward a side door I hadn't noticed. "Come on. We don't have time to argue about this." "He thinks I'm a traitor," I said, the words tasting bitter. "He thinks you're a threat he can't afford to trust right now," Kaelin corrected, guiding me through narrow corridors as the compound came alive with urgent movement. Wolves, because that's what they were, what they'd always been, rushed past us in various states of transformation. Some still looked mostly human. Others had already given themselves over to something more primal, their features elongated, their movements powerful and inhuman. We reached a heavy metal door set into reinforced concrete. Kaelin spun the combination lock with practiced speed, and the door opened with a hydraulic hiss. Inside was a fortified room maybe 15 feet square, lined with supplies, water, medical equipment, communications gear. Another door at the back stood slightly ajar, and through it I could see Finn sleeping in a makeshift nest of blankets, his small chest rising and falling with steady breaths. Inside, Kaelin ordered, already moving to gather the pup. "The walls are reinforced steel and concrete. If they breach the compound, this is the last line of defense." "If I could help," I started, but the sound of gunfire cut me off. Sharp cracks echoed through the compound, followed by howls that made my blood run cold. Not grief this time. Rage. Battle fury. Kaelin's expression hardened. "You help by staying alive and keeping Finn safe. That's what an Omega does, protects the pack's future." She thrust an emergency radio into my hands. "Channel 3. Don't use it unless you have no other choice." Then she was gone, pulling the heavy door shut behind her. The lock engaged with a final, definitive click, and I was alone with an unconscious pup and the muffled sounds of war erupting outside. My grandmother's pendant burned hot against my chest, and somewhere beyond these reinforced walls, Garrick Voss was fighting for his pack's survival while half believing I'd helped engineer their destruction. I pressed my hand against the cold metal door and felt the vibrations of violence bleeding through. Felt the pack's fear and fury like a living thing, pressing against my skin, begging for something I didn't know how to give. Not yet. Chapter 5. The gunfire intensified over the next hour, punctuated by howls and screams that made my skin crawl. I sat with my back against the reinforced door, Finn curled in my lap, trying to project the same calm I'd used to heal him. My pendant pulsed warm against my skin, responding to my desperate need to do something, anything, besides hide while people died outside. Finn stirred occasionally, whimpering softly before settling back into sleep. Each small sound from him felt like a tether keeping me grounded when panic threatened to overwhelm my senses. Then the door at the back of the safe room, the one Kaelin had left slightly ajar, clicked open, and the healer slipped through, her face pale and streaked with someone else's blood. She locked it quickly behind her, her hands shaking as she engaged multiple bolts. "They've breached the main courtyard," she whispered, sliding down the wall to sit beside me. "Garrick's holding the central position, but we've lost the north and east wings. They're pushing toward," she stopped, her eyes fixed on Finn. "They're pushing toward the medical wing. Where Finn should be. They're looking for him specifically?" "I think so." Kaelin's voice was barely audible. Their formation, their targeting, it's too precise. They know our layout. They know where we'd keep an injured pup. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the cold concrete. Someone told them. Before Kaylin could respond, we both froze. Voices filtered through the back door, human voices, speaking low and urgent. They were in the corridor just beyond, close enough that I could make out individual words. Medical wing is clear. No sign of the asset. Male voice, clipped and professional. Miller confirmed the Luna's offspring survived. Intelligence was solid. A different voice deeper. It has to be here somewhere. The asset. Kaylin's hand found mine in the darkness, her grip crushing. They're talking about Finn like he's a commodity, I finished, my stomach turning to ice. The voices continued, growing clearer as the hunters moved closer to our position. Genetic analysis will bring 7 figures, minimum. A purebred alpha heir this young? Black market research facilities will tear each other apart bidding for him. Assuming he's alive. 3 days exposure, silver wounds. Miller said the human woman had him. If she kept him breathing this long, he's viable. A pause, then, speaking of which, find the woman too. Anyone who can heal silver poisoning might be valuable. Or at least worth interrogating about pack defenses. Kaylin's breath caught. Her eyes met mine in the dim emergency lighting, and I saw my own horror reflected back. How's our ammunition holding? The first voice asked. 70% capacity. The silver rounds are performing exactly as projected. Their healing factor can't compensate fast enough. There was a note of satisfaction in the speaker's tone that made my blood boil. Beta designation targets are dropping with single shots. Alpha will take more, but he's fighting a war of attrition he can't win. Fucking animals don't even realize they're already dead. Footsteps moved past our position, fading gradually down the corridor. Kaylin and I sat in rigid silence for several minutes after the voices disappeared, neither of us daring to breathe normally. 7 figures, I finally whispered, looking down at Finn's small, sleeping form. They want to sell him. Dissect him, more likely. Kaylin's voice was hollow. Study his genetic structure, his regenerative capabilities. He'd spend whatever short life they gave him in a laboratory. Her hands clenched into fists. They killed Kara to get to him. Now they've come back to finish what they started. You said someone told them our layout. Someone gave them intelligence. I kept my voice low, but urgency made it sharp. Who? Kaylin's expression went dark with fury and grief. We had a beta named Marcus transferred in 6 months ago from a northern pack. Strong, capable, seemed eager to integrate. She looked toward the locked door, toward the sounds of ongoing battle. He was on perimeter duty the night Kara died. He's the one who discovered the breach too late to warn her. The man who came to Garrick's study, I said, pieces clicking together. The one who reported the attack on the North Ridge. Same one. Kaylin's jaw clenched. Garrick suspected, but without proof, pack law protects him. We can't, she stopped abruptly, her head snapping toward the back door. Someone's coming. We heard them before we saw them, heavy footsteps, at least 2 people, moving with purpose. The door handle rattled, testing the locks. Safe room sealed, a voice said. Reinforced steel. We'll need charges. No time. Alpha's pushing back harder than expected. We need to extract now with what we have. The pup is either dead already or so well hidden we won't find him in the time we have left. Cut losses. Pull back to rally point Beta. The footsteps retreated, leaving us in trembling silence. Kaylin's radio crackled softly. Garrick's voice came through, rough and strained. Kaylin. Status. She grabbed the radio with shaking hands. Secure. Both packages safe. A pause, heavy with meaning. Then, they're retreating. Hold position. Do not open that door for anyone but me. The radio went silent, and in the darkness, Finn finally stirred fully awake, his small amber eyes finding mine with an awareness that seemed far too ancient for something so young. Outside, the gunfire began to fade. Chapter 6. The silence after the gunfire stopped was somehow worse than the battle. Kaylin and I sat in the darkness, listening to the muffled sounds of movement throughout the compound: footsteps, low voices, the occasional groan of pain. Finn had gone still in my arms, his small body tense, as though he could sense the danger hadn't truly passed. Then came the specific pattern of knocks on the outer door, 3 sharp raps, pause, 2 more. Kaylin was on her feet instantly, moving to disengage the locks. The door swung open to reveal Dax, the massive beta who'd been carried in with silver wounds. He looked worse now than he had an hour ago, his face gray with blood loss, his right side wrapped in makeshift bandages already soaked through with crimson. "Alpha's orders," he said, his voice strained. "Get them out through the forest tunnel. Now." Kaylin moved immediately to gather supplies, but I stayed rooted in place, my mind racing. The hunters retreated. Garrick said to hold position. They retreated to regroup. Dax leaned heavily against the doorframe, and I could see the effort it took him to stay upright. Marcus just confirmed it over compromised channels. "They're coming back at dawn with reinforcements and heavy explosives. Alpha wants the pup out of the compound before then." "Marcus," Kaylin spat the name like poison. "The traitor is still giving orders?" "Garrick's keeping him close, playing ignorant until we can deal with him properly." Dax's eyes fixed on me with desperate intensity. "But right now, we need to move. The tunnel exits 3 miles north, near the old logging road. There's a vehicle waiting." "No." The word came out of me with surprising force. Both of them stopped, staring at me. Dax straightened slightly despite his obvious pain. "This isn't a discussion. Alpha's orders are tactical," I interrupted, standing carefully with Finn still in my arms. "He's thinking like an alpha. Protect the air. Ensure survival. But he's not thinking about what happens after." I looked between them, feeling certainty crystallize in my chest. "If Kaylin and I run with Finn, what happens to the rest of you?" "We hold the compound as long as we can," Dax said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Against reinforcements, heavy explosives, and unlimited silver ammunition?" I shook my head. "You'll die. All of you. And then the hunters will track us down at their leisure. We'll have bought maybe a day, and Finn will still end up in a laboratory." Kaylin's face was stricken. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we don't run." I moved toward them, and my grandmother's pendant flared hot against my chest, responding to the determination flooding through me. "You said omegas balance alphas. That they influence emotional states. What I did for Finn, the healing, the calm, that was projection, wasn't it? Pushing my energy into him. Untrained and incredibly dangerous," Kaylin said sharply. "You nearly killed yourself healing one small pup. What you're proposing?" "I'm proposing I do what I was apparently born to do." My voice came out steady despite the fear threading through my veins. "The hunters are human. Human minds, human emotions. If I can project calm and healing, I can project other things. Confusion. Fear. Doubt." Dax's eyes widened with understanding and immediate horror. "You want to use yourself as a weapon. An emotional weapon against 20 armed mercenaries. I want to give Garrick and the pack a fighting chance." I held his gaze. "You're wounded. Garrick is exhausted. How many others are injured? How many can actually fight effectively when they come back?" The questions hung heavy between us. "But if I can break their formation, disrupt their coordination for even a few minutes." "You could burn out your mind," Kaylin cut in, her voice rising. "Omega projection on that scale untrained? You'd be lucky to survive it with your sanity intact. And if I don't try, we're all dead anyway." I looked down at Finn, who watched me with those 2 knowing amber eyes. He survived 3 days alone, wounded, trying to get home. I'm not going to dishonor that by running when I might be able to help. Dax and Kaylin exchanged a long look, some wordless communication passing between them. Finally, Dax cursed under his breath. "Alpha is going to tear me apart for this." "Alpha is going to be too busy staying alive to worry about it," I said. "Where is he?" "Central Hall, coordinating defenses." Dax pushed off the door frame with visible effort. "If we're doing this insane thing, we do it now, before he has time to order otherwise." He looked at me with something between respect and resignation. You understand you might die doing this? My hand drifted to my pendant, feeling the warmth pulsing through it in rhythm with my heartbeat. I understand I've spent my whole life feeling incomplete, like I was waiting for something I couldn't name. I met his eyes steadily. I'm not waiting anymore. Chapter 7. Kaylin took Finn reluctantly, cradling the pup against her chest as she backed toward the tunnel entrance. If this doesn't work, it will work, I said with more confidence than I felt. Get him safe. That's what matters. She disappeared into the shadows, and I turned to follow Dax through corridors that reeked of blood and gunpowder. The compound was a war zone, walls pocked with bullet holes, bodies of both wolves and hunters scattered across blood-slicked floors. Dax moved with grim determination despite his wounds, leading me toward the sounds of ongoing combat. We emerged into the central hall just as the hunters' second wave hit. They came through the shattered main doors in tactical formation, 20 men in black tactical gear, moving with military precision. Silver-loaded weapons gleamed in the emergency lighting, and I watched in horror as the first volley cut down 2 wolves before they could even shift fully. Then I saw Garrick. He was magnificent and terrifying in his wolf form, massive, easily twice the size of a natural wolf, with midnight black fur and those burning amber eyes. He moved like violence given shape, tearing through hunters with brutal efficiency. But even as I watched, I could see the exhaustion in his movements, the way he favored his left side, the blood matting his fur. He was fighting with everything he had, and it still wasn't enough. A hunter with a silver machete closed in on his blind side. Garrick turned too late, and I saw the blade arc toward his exposed throat. I didn't think. Didn't plan. My hand closed around my grandmother's pendant, and I felt something inside me break open. Not break apart, but break free. Like a dam giving way to a flood that had been building my entire life. The energy that poured out of me wasn't gentle like when I'd healed Finn. This was raw, primal, devastating. I felt it leave my body in a wave of pure psychic force, channeled and amplified through the amber stone until it became something weaponized and terrible. It hit the hunters like a physical blow. The man with the machete staggered, his weapon clattering to the ground as his hands went to his head. Around the hall, his companions faltered mid-stride, their tactical precision dissolving into chaos. I felt what I was doing to them, felt it with sickening intimacy. I was pouring doubt into their minds, stripping away their training and their purpose, replacing confidence with gnawing fear. Making them feel the weight of what they'd done, the wrongness of their mission, the certainty that they were all about to die in this place. One hunter turned and fired at nothing, his eyes wide with terror at threats only he could see. Another dropped to his knees, hands covering his ears as though trying to block out sounds that existed only in his fractured thoughts. Their formation collapsed, coordination shattering into individual panic. The pack didn't hesitate. They surged forward with renewed fury, and now the hunters were the ones on the defensive, scrambling backward, breaking ranks, some throwing down their weapons entirely to flee. I felt Garrick's presence like a beacon through the chaos, felt the moment he understood what I was doing, felt his shock and something else I couldn't name. He moved through the disoriented hunters with lethal purpose, and where he led, the pack followed, driving them back through the shattered doors and into the snow beyond. But I couldn't stop. Couldn't pull the power back. It was pouring out of me in an endless torrent, and I was drowning in the feedback, feeling not just my own emotions, but theirs, the hunter's terror and the pack's savage relief. All of it crashing through me simultaneously until I couldn't tell where I ended and they began. My knees hit the ground, but I barely felt it. The pendant was burning in my hand, so hot I smelled my own flesh cooking, but I couldn't let go. If I stopped now, the hunters would regroup. Would come back. Would kill everyone. Through the gray creeping into my vision, I saw Garrick transform back to human form, saw him running toward me, shouting something I couldn't hear over the roaring in my ears. His hands closed around my shoulders, and I felt his presence trying to anchor me, trying to pull me back from the edge I was tumbling over. "Mira, let go." His voice finally penetrated the chaos. "You've done enough. Let go." But I couldn't. The power had its hooks in me, and it wanted more, wanted everything. Wanted to burn through me until there was nothing left but ash and echoes. Then Garrick's hand covered mine, his palm pressing against the pendant, and I felt his strength flowing into me. Not more power, but something steadier. Control. He was showing me how to close the floodgates, how to pull the energy back inside instead of letting it consume me completely. The connection between us blazed bright and absolute, and together we forced the power down, sealing it away until the torrent became a trickle, then stopped. The pendant fell from my nerveless fingers. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was Garrick's face above mine, his amber eyes wide with something that looked like reverence and fear in equal measure. Then nothing. Chapter 8. I surfaced from darkness slowly, like swimming up from the bottom of a deep well. Every part of my body ached with a bone-deep exhaustion that made even breathing feel like an accomplishment. My mouth tasted like copper and ash, and when I tried to open my eyes, the dim light felt like daggers. "Easy." The voice was rough, familiar, achingly gentle. "You've been out for 2 days. Don't try to move too quickly." Garrick. I managed to turn my head toward his voice, forcing my eyes to focus. He sat in a chair beside the bed, my bed, I realized, recognizing the medical wing's sterile walls. But he looked different than I remembered. Smaller somehow, though that was impossible given his size. Humbled, I realized. He looked humbled. Bandages wrapped his torso and left arm, and I could see the edges of healing wounds beneath the white gauze. His face was haggard, dark circles under those amber eyes, but when our gazes met, something in his expression made my breath catch. He was looking at me the way people look at miracles they can't quite believe are real. "Finn," I managed, my voice a ruined rasp. Something like relief flickered across Garrick's features. Thriving. Eating everything Kaelin puts in front of him and trying to follow the other pups around like he wasn't nearly dead a week ago. His hand moved, hesitated, then settled gently on the bed near mine, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "Because of you. All of it is because of you. The hunters. Gone. The ones who survived your..." He paused, seeming to search for the right word. "Your assault won't be coming back. Half of them fled into the wilderness without their weapons. We tracked the others to the logging road and made sure they understood that returning would mean death." His jaw clenched. "Marcus tried to run with them. He didn't make it far." The weight of that statement settled between us, justice delivered, a traitor dealt with. I should have felt something about it, but I was too exhausted to muster more than vague relief. "What you did," Garrick continued, his voice dropping lower, "shouldn't have been possible. Kaelin says even a trained Omega couldn't have projected that level of force without years of preparation. You burned through enough energy to kill yourself 3 times over." His hand finally bridged the distance, covering mine with careful reverence. "You saved us. Saved the pack. Saved Finn. And nearly destroyed yourself doing it." "Had to," I whispered. "Couldn't run. Couldn't let them." "I know." His thumb traced small circles on the back of my hand, the gesture unconscious and oddly intimate. "I know, and I'm sorry. Sorry I suspected you. Sorry I locked you away when you were trying to help. Sorry I didn't see what you were until you nearly died proving it." He leaned forward, and the intensity in his eyes made something in my chest tighten. "You are Omega, Mira Winters. Not just by blood or heritage, but by choice. By sacrifice. You chose this pack over your own safety, and that makes you ours in a way that transcends any bond I've ever known." The possessiveness in his voice should have alarmed me. Instead, it felt like recognition. Like something clicking into place that had always been slightly misaligned. "I can't go back," I said, and it wasn't a question. "To my cabin. My old life. Can I? Would you want to?" Garrick's grip on my hand tightened fractionally. "Could you walk away from Finn now? From what you felt when you healed him, when you protected this pack?" His voice roughened. "From what you felt when you touched me?" I couldn't answer because he was right. The bond I'd felt in those desperate moments, first with Finn, then with Garrick when he'd helped me close the floodgates, had been undeniable. Primal. Like recognizing a part of myself I hadn't known was missing. The pack needs an Omega, Garrick said quietly. I need an Omega. We've been incomplete since Kara died, fractured and vulnerable. You felt it the moment you arrived, that grief, that emptiness. He shifted closer, his free hand coming up to cut my face with devastating gentleness. You fit that emptiness perfectly. Like you were made for it. Like we were waiting for you. I don't know how to be what you need, I admitted, my voice breaking. I don't know how to control what I did. Don't know the rules, the traditions. You'll learn. We'll teach you. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. But the most important part, the courage, the instinct, the absolute refusal to abandon those who need you, that's already there. That's who you are. I felt tears prick at my eyes, and I wasn't sure if they were from exhaustion or relief or the overwhelming weight of what he was offering. And if I say yes? If I stay? Then you become mine. The words were possessive, territorial, but his tone held a question. My Omega. My balance. My mate, if you'll have me. And I become yours, your alpha, your protector, your anchor when the power threatens to consume you. His forehead pressed against mine, and I felt him trembling. I won't lie and say it will be easy. The pack will test you. The council will question you. And learning to control your abilities will be painful and difficult. But you won't face any of it alone. Through the exhaustion and pain, through the uncertainty and fear, I felt something else rising. Certainty. Purpose. The bone-deep knowledge that I was exactly where I belonged. Yes, I whispered, and felt his breath catch. I'll stay. Garrick's eyes closed, and when they opened again, they held something fierce and tender and utterly unguarded. Then rest, Omega. Heal. And when you're strong enough, we'll make it official. We'll show the pack and the council and anyone else who doubts that you're ours, and we are yours. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, gentle as a benediction, and I let my eyes drift closed, feeling safer than I had in years. Chapter 9. 3 days later, I stood in front of the mirror in the room they'd given me, a space that had once belonged to Kara, Garrick told me, though they'd removed her personal belongings to storage. The room still smelled faintly of sage and cedar, and sometimes I thought I could feel her presence, not hostile but watchful. Curious about the human woman who would try to fill the void she'd left behind. I looked different. The hollowness in my face had filled in slightly with Kaylin's careful feeding and rest. My grandmother's pendant hung at my throat, the amber stone catching the afternoon light. But it was my eyes that had changed most. They held a certainty now that hadn't existed before. I knew what I was. What I'd chosen to become. A soft knock preceded Garrick's entrance. He'd healed with supernatural speed, the bandages gone, only faint pink scars remaining where silver had torn through flesh. He wore formal clothing, dark shirt, fitted pants, and carried himself with the easy authority of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. Until he looked at me. Then something in his expression softened, became almost vulnerable. The council arrived an hour ago, he said. 5 alphas from neighboring territories, come to verify the rumors of a human Omega. His mouth quirked slightly. And to assess whether we're stable enough to maintain our territory after losing our Luna and nearly falling to hunters. No pressure, then, I said, trying for levity despite the anxiety coiling in my stomach. Garrick crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands settling on my shoulders with grounding warmth. They'll test you. Question your legitimacy. Some may even challenge your right to the position. His amber eyes held mine. But they can't deny what you are. Every wolf who enters this compound will feel it. Will recognize you on an instinctual level that supersedes politics or prejudice. And if they demand I prove it somehow, then you'll show them exactly what you showed the hunters. His voice held absolute confidence. But I don't think it will come to that. The pack has already accepted you. That matters more than any council's approval. A scratching at the door interrupted us, followed by a small, insistent whine. Garrick smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his severe features, and opened the door. Finn tumbled in, no longer the dying creature I'd carried through the snow, but a healthy, energetic pup who launched himself at my legs with enthusiastic yips. I scooped him up, laughing as he licked my face with single-minded determination. He'd grown in just these few days, his coat thick and lustrous, the wound on his side now just a thin white scar. When he settled in my arms, his amber eyes, so like Garrick's, watched me with that unnerving awareness. "He follows you everywhere," Garrick observed. "Won't let anyone else feed him. Kaylin says he cries when you're not nearby." "He bonded to me," I said softly, stroking Finn's soft fur. "When I healed him. We're connected now." "He needs a name," Garrick said. "A true name, not just what his mother called him." "That's your right as his savior." "As Omega." I looked down at the small, perfect creature in my arms, the pup who'd survived impossible odds, who'd crawled miles through the snow seeking home, who'd brought me to this pack and this destiny. "Hope," I said finally. "His name is Hope, because that's what he gave all of us." Garrick's hand came to rest on Hope's head, his fingers brushing against mine. "Hope Wintersvoss," he said formally, adding both our names to create a new whole. "First of the new generation. Son of Luna Kara and Alpha Garrick, blessed by Omega Mira." The words felt like ceremony, like magic, like a promise made tangible. Hope yipped his approval, and something settled in my chest, the final piece clicking into place. "The council is waiting in the Great Hall," Garrick said, his hand sliding down to capture mine. "Are you ready?" I thought about my grandmother, about the pendant she'd given me and the legacy I hadn't understood until now. Thought about the empty cabin in the woods and the isolated life I'd been living, waiting for something I couldn't name. Thought about the howling that had drawn me here, the grief that had resonated in my chest, the moment I'd chosen to fight rather than flee. "I'm ready," I said, and meant it. We walked through the compound together, Alpha and Omega, with Hope trotting at our heels. Pack members emerged from buildings to watch us pass, and I felt their emotions like a tangible presence. Relief. Hope. Gratitude. Acceptance. The fractured, grieving pack I'd encountered a week ago had begun to heal, and I could feel the bonds between them strengthening, stabilizing, with me at the center holding them together. The great hall doors stood open, revealing 5 imposing figures seated in a semicircle. 5 alphas, each radiating their own unique brand of power and authority. They turned as we entered, their eyes assessing, measuring, judging. I felt their collective weight pressing down on me, testing my resolve. Felt them searching for weakness, for proof that a human had no place in their world. Then I felt Garrick's hand tighten on mine, his presence a solid anchor. Felt Hope's small body pressed against my leg, his absolute trust warming me from the inside out. Felt my grandmother's pendant pulse with steady heat, reminding me of the generations of Winter's women who'd walked between worlds before me. I lifted my chin, met the council's scrutiny with steady eyes, and let them feel what I was. Let the Omega power radiate from me in gentle waves, not aggressive, not demanding, just present. Undeniable. Real. One by one, their expressions shifted. Recognition. Acceptance. Even a hint of awe. The eldest alpha, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes like ice, rose from her seat. She studied me for a long moment, then inclined her head in a gesture of respect that sent ripples through the assembled wolves. "The Black Creek Pack has found its Omega," she said formally. "The council recognizes Mira Winters and grants blessing to the bond." Her lips quirked slightly. "Welcome to our world, Omega. May you find it kinder than it has been to those who came before." Garrick's arm slid around my waist, drawing me closer, and I felt his relief like my own. Together, we bowed to the council, accepting their recognition and all the responsibility it carried. And as Hope yipped happily at our feet and the pack's emotions swelled with renewed hope and purpose, I knew with absolute certainty that I was home. Not the cabin in the woods. Not the isolated life I'd left behind. Here. With this pack. With this alpha. With this small, miraculous pup who'd survived the impossible and led me to my destiny. This was where I belonged. This was where I would stay.